Just going to give
This
you.
meeting is being recorded.
Oops, it started talking over me to tell you that the meeting is being recorded. But hello, everybody. Michael Hamilton again from Ubele with this week's Agbero, I can't even say it now, Agbero webinar. I'm gonna remember today to introduce the guests because I always forget to introduce the guests at the beginning, and so I'm actually going to get them to introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Phil Tulba.
Hi, thank you, Michael. And it's Agbero, just to help you out. Yeah, so my name is Phil Tulba. I'm the Associate Director for Community Wealth Building. So I work very closely with Michael and the Learning and Practice Hub. And actually the Agbero program sits across both hubs. And I'm really happy to be seeing you all here today.
And next I'm going to introduce Sarah Ebanja.
Hi, so my name's Sarah Ebanja. I'm Deputy Chief Executive Officer at Ubele, and I have the unenviable task of trying to keep these two guys, Michael and Phil, ensuring that they don't want to stray off and do things that we're saying, but they're so innovative and creative. So, so we're trying to introduce what we're going to be preaching.
Okay, we'll hear a little bit more about that later on. Nico.
Hi everyone, I'm Nico. I'm a web developer full-time and I work for a company called Outlandish, where we support charities, small businesses and other organizations with their online presence.
And Zinthiya, I can't see you in the thing, but maybe, that's because you're hidden down at the end. Do you want to just introduce yourself very quickly, Zinthiya?
Hello, can you hear me now? Yes.
I can hear you now, yes.
Yeah. So my name is Zinthiya. I'm the founder of the Zinthiya Trust. We're a charity based in Leicester, supporting women and families in Leicester and Leicestershire.
Okay. And so we're going to hear a little bit more about that later on. Thanks very much, Zinthiya. I never know from
This meeting
here,
is being recorded.
I never know from here if everybody's in the room. So I'm going to assume that everybody's in the room and we're going to kick off. And we're going to kick off with you, Sarah. How you doing?
Okay. I'm doing fine.
Okay, good. Sarah. I call Sarah the boss. Sarah's the new boss. And Sarah, we've been talking about leadership quite a lot in the Agbero webinars, and kind of what leadership means. And we've been kind of attaching the idea of leadership to kind of people and personal qualities. And whilst that's a kind of important aspect of leadership, Zinthiya, do you want to just switch your microphone off for us? Whilst that's an important aspect of leadership, there is this kind of underpinning structure and systems that leaders need to make things happen. Zinthiya, if you could turn your microphone off, that would be really useful. You haven't? Oh, you have actually, haven't you? That's really weird.
I've turned mine off as well, but you're reverberating.
Yeah, no, okay. So I don't know how much of my gabble you kind of heard, Sarah, but kind of leadership as personal qualities, but actually leadership is about systems and processes, and in order to make the things that we want to happen. Is that the right way round of looking at it, or? No,
I look at it in a slightly different way. So, and why I say that, first of all, I'm talking about the last bit of what you said about the systems bit. So from leadership is all about person in many respects. What is the role of the leader vis-a-vis the manager is one of the things. But the other thing, and in our organisations, you know, our not-for-profits, we're here for purpose. There's something of passion has brought us to want to address these issues and tackle, for want of a better term, these wicked issues. So for Ubele, you know, that the ravages of social injustice consistently throughout our communities, we want to address that and try and make a difference to that. Okay. And when I mentioned earlier about working with you two, Phil and yourself, Michael, that passion you have to address it. And so as creators, disruptors, trying to really say, no, there's another way to do these things. If left to yourself, I would say you'd probably go off and do a whole range of things. And then something might happen and you might say, oops, I didn't think about that.
Uh-huh.
So what my role is, and it's, you know, I'm fortunate to be in this role, and it's fortunate that Ubele can have somebody like me in this role. Many organizations can't. And when they're very small, many organizations just focus on the operational rather than those key things that have to control you. Because the things that, and so I always think from this perspective, what can make my business, and Ubele's a business, we're all businesses here, what can make us fail? And it's not what we deliver things that people want. The things that can make us fail are because we haven't got the returns on time. We can't demonstrate something. These things that can be sticky issues, or we've not proven something that we should have because we're a legal incorporated entity. So therefore, first of all, as leaders, you want to be satisfied that there are a few controls around that keep you within the boundaries of what we're able to do. And the role of the systems is to do that, but also to facilitate that growth of the organization, the success of the organization. Because if the center is a stifling, stopping center, you're not going to grow. Your creativity is all going to go to shop. You have to fill out forms, you have to do this, this, and this. So you need to allow the creativity to flourish whilst also trying to control it. And so leadership will set that, knows what the vision is, will try and set that overall framework. And then in management, their responsibility, so my responsibility as a manager is to make sure that we all work within that. Is that
yeah, I'm kind of I'm going back some years and remembering being a youth worker in Lewisham Youth Service, and and there was the youth office where the finance people were, the management were, and I remember we'd constantly be going into their office and they'd constantly be complaining because we'd walk into their office and we'd sit on the desks and we'd kind of carry on as if we were in our youth club and not kind of having a proper respect for the work that the core was doing to keep us alive. And I remember the senior finance officer, I think it was, he said to me, Michael, I probably know more about these organizations which are part of the youth service than any of you do, because I do the books. I know when people are working. I know when people are off. I know which youth clubs are busy. I know which ones aren't. And so that kind of central core of kind of holding it together is kind of critical, really, to the work.
It's critical, but I would say that, and that's a given in most organizations, there'll have to be some form of controls or budget sign-offs and things like that in this regard. The real, to me, one of the key important things is that in terms of how you go about doing things, and this is where it comes to, I've spoken about the vision, you know, if your vision is just these social injustices, and we've decided in Ubele one of the ways we're going to go about it is really trying to strengthen and grow community wealth, but through the infrastructure. Okay, so we've decided that. But so you could go around doing it. You could send your team in and say, hey, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. No. We have to really understand, how do we behave as an organization? What are our values and what are our beliefs, and how do we want everyone to behave? You're a director of Ubele, Michael. You have a great understanding, and Phil, how should we behave? We put it in our job descriptions and person specs. What is that culture? And it's not just for what a better term, our employees, because of the way we are. It's most important we do that all the time. And so having, for example, a set of core values and principles, and having a framework that enables people to work within, everybody knowing what they can expect by being part of Ubele or being part of your own organization is really important. Now, you know, when you go back to public sector, they've got resources. You're blessed when you work in public sector. You've got every department looking at you. It can be a nightmare as well. Lawyers, finance, everything, HR, everything has to give their analysis. In small organizations, it's often one person's got to do it. And what's really important for the leadership to do, the board, is to ensure that they can support the executive, so that the executive, as much as possible, can focus on the execution and delivery of the strategy without getting too much caught up. There is loads and loads of bureaucracy in running these organizations, but our role as leaders is to try and minimize that. So you have controls around that as well, but they're not seen as controls so much. We always think of the financial ones or safeguarding and those things. And just to mention, when I talk about safeguarding, I'm not just talking about people. We all depend on funding from someone. We're all accountable to someone, and there'll be accountability to regulators if in certain industries, specifically looking at everything. And that accountability is because it's for their money they've given us. So we have to make sure we're looking after their money properly in the lines how they expected. So having systems in place to do that, investing it where appropriate, not where appropriate, and not doing it where appropriate. Yeah. So it's very much about the people bit.
So it's important for people to kind of see the role of leadership and to see the role of management as interconnected, but different roles in the organization.
Yeah, they are interconnected. So I'm a leader and a manager. I would say that you, or my other colleagues, I should say, have the benefit now of anything that harsh that needs to be done. Or we can't go and see Sarah. And it's like, I'm like the controller, it feels like, of all of that. But it's really important in some respects. It depends where you are as an organization and what you're trying to your objectives is overall as well. So,
yeah, I suppose there's a kind of element of safety there. And so I don't mind talking about you because you're in the room, but the degree to which we have become a safer organization with good management has really made a difference to our ability to go out and to work, to just kind of know that there is a safety, there is somebody there that knows what they're doing in terms of the core of the organization. Yeah.
And one thing I would say with you know, I've run community organizations, I've worked within them, been on boards. And one thing I would say, there's a couple of things. First of all, when you're looking for board members, if any of you are looking for board members, or when you're thinking about looking for board members, it's really, really important to think about, does the board member you want, do you want someone that's a figurehead and can go out and out at the very highest levels about you? Or do you want someone that's going to get their hands dirty as well because you've not got enough people yourself or not enough expertise? It's very important to do that, because otherwise sometimes you may not get the right mix of board. And remember, you're getting, you know, in many respects, there's expert experience on that board that should be helping within that context as well. So it's important to look at it from that. And it's always important, you must stick to the strategy. So, and that's again, the board is the ring holder of that strategy. And we can, and I know from being running these organizations, the board can sometimes feel like they're a nightmare and interfering, and all you're ever doing is reporting to the board. So there's
so what is operations infrastructure then? If we're what is it to have?
So typically in any organization, you have to have a sort of an infrastructure such as one of the ones, safeguarding throughout. You have to have that. So you have to, and basically the infrastructure for safeguarding is it's about people, and the overall rules of safeguarding is how can you as an organization ensure that you minimize the possibility or likelihood of any of your workforce causing harm to people. That's where safeguarding comes from within that. So within that context, it's all about understanding you as an individual, what is your role in the team when it comes to safeguarding and its vulnerable adults or children. Now that's different to a control framework, which is about controlling who spends money. So in some organizations might say you can only spend up to £100 and you have to have had a budget to do it. Some organizations might say you can spend £10,000. And it really depends on what's your organization like. I worked for one organization, it only used to do 12 transactions a year, okay? But they were big in terms of income, big transactions, £300,000. Whoops, give me the invoice off for 300. I wasn't an organization that was issuing loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of invoices or things like that. So you have to think about what that is, and they can become a bit of a nightmare. And that's the controls that most people think about in there. HR are really, really important. The HR environment is to ensure at one level that you as an employer, you're operating legally. and you're fulfilling your legal responsibilities to employees. But on the other hand, it's about, you know, transparency. How do you engage all your workforce in everything that you do? So that's another set. So you'll have a set of controls or mitigation measures in place for many things. Research has shown one's relating to finance, one's relating to HR and people, and your culture and values, I'm including in all of that, your approach to diversity in that aspect, and controls relating to performance, knowing what you're aiming for, knowing where you're going. Those make a difference in productivity. They've measured that, and it's been measured across the world. They say that they cannot see a direct correlation between improvements in productivity and risk assessments, but risk assessments are vital in our type of industry, particularly for funders in wanting to, because as far as they're concerned, they're taking a risk giving to us. So we got to know those risks, and we got to know them ourselves, our risks. It's different running one thing on that might be small to trying to go national or bigger, much bigger.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Sarah. That's really useful for me to hear. And I'm sure that lots of people think that we know it, but it's really good to be reminded and to kind of have it at the forefront of our brain. And I think the thing that I think the thing that I take most from it is something about kind of knowing what you need. Because, you know, if you have the wrong trustees in place, you say if you need a big thinker on your team, you should go out and get a big thinker. But if you need a good manager on your team, you should go out and get a good manager. And if you get that wrong, it really does make a difference to the work of the organizations. And so I'd like to kind of move from you really, because that links with, hello, Zinthiya, how are we doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Michael.
Are you okay? Good. And you're in Leicester.
I am based in Leicester. Yes.
You're based in Leicester, and I said to you earlier on, I've been looking at the kind of website and just seeing that. Wow, you're a busy woman.
Yes. So I'm the founder of the Zinthiya Trust, a charity that we set up in 2009. At the time, mainly to support disadvantaged women and women from racially minoritized backgrounds, because Leicester, as you know, is has a high proportion of ethnic minority people. And then over the years working with these women, I understood if I was to support women to get to where they need to, I also had to work with the family unit. So for example, a woman would go into prison, leaving her children with the extended family, or with the ex-partner, or with the grandparents and things like that. So if we were to support them, then we had to also work with the family. So now the Zinthiya Trust work with women and families. And our main area of support is providing support to women fleeing abuse, but working with family that includes men, or working on money and debt issues, because with the current cost of living crisis and things like that. So that's what we've been doing. Each year we support an average 3,000 people, unique beneficiaries. Because, and that has increased after the pandemic, because more and more people are coming forward to access support services, while there's less services out there, especially focusing on racially diverse groups, because there's the generic services like the Citizen Advice Bureau and things like that, but their support is not tailor-made to the needs of these individuals who are having multiple barriers. So therefore we are seeing an increase. And then, yes, so working with the Zinthiya Trust and providing these support services, Leicester at the time, even pre-pandemic, we had about some wards in the city had 40% of child poverty. The rates was as high as that, and especially among racially diverse communities. So at the time we used to run food banks. Now, food banks is not an ultimate solution to the food crisis and food poverty facing communities. Based on that learning, then we set up the Community Benefit Society, the shop that we now sell low-cost food and hygiene products to people on low income, but also provide free support to people in crisis. So that's
this isn't just a little corner shop, is it, Zinthiya?
No, it's a social
when you
supermarket.
kind of pass over it and say we set up a shop, you
yeah,
kind of made it sound like it might be a little kind of stall in a community centre. But this is a serious supermarket.
It is a serious supermarket operating 6 days a week. So Monday to Friday from 10 to 4, and on a Saturday from 10 to 2 o'clock. So it operates 6 days a week, supporting the community.
And how is it different to other supermarkets then?
So, for example, one thing is the food and the products in the supermarket is subsidized. So people on low income can come and purchase. And if there's somebody in crisis, such as a woman fleeing abuse, or a homeless person, or person coming out of prison who have no income, they would get free emergency food products. So they will get it free. But most importantly, what we learned from during the pandemic, people didn't have the buying power to go and buy in bulk. So therefore they went in hunger, and they couldn't afford, because they couldn't pay those supermarket prices. So learning from that, what we did is, now we sell like loose items such as 1 egg, 1 toilet paper, toilet roll, and things like. So people have that opportunity to come and buy according to what they have. And also when they buy the food, they buy what they really need rather than wasting food, because we are in a culture of wasting food. So that reduces the food waste and the redistribution of surplus food. So it has multiple facets to the project.
And so what would the big supermarkets beginning with T or S think about having a supermarket like yours that's able to undercut them?
So I think we are in a better position because we work in partnership with them.
Right, okay.
So for example, Tesco's give us surplus food. We can go and collect, like what they put out, like every evening they would send us a text message saying that this store has some food, do you want to collect it? So if it's within our capacity, then we would collect it and work with them. So we sort of signed up to Tesco's, Morrison's, and some of the supermarkets like that. So we sort of try to work in partnership.
Right, okay, so you're working in partnership with those people.
Yes.
And they're in fact more than in part, they're supplying you.
They're supplying, yes.
Not
the full stock, but whatever is surplus to them, then we sort of feed them. Sometimes they make donations, like say for example, like during Christmas time, if they have a bulk like socks or something which don't get sold, then they would give us to things like that. So we try to work in as much as possible with partnership with the supermarkets, but also with local food businesses, manufacturers. So we have like the sandwich maker Samvad Brothers based in Leicester. So then surplus bread. Sometimes we go and collect them, but then what we do is we just don't keep it for ourselves. We also redistribute it among the other local food banks.
Right. And
then so we sort of exchange butter, having a bartering system going on from time to time with surplus food. So that enables us to subsidize the costs.
It just sounds like an amazing operation. It
is a very good operation. So we were, for example, in 2020, I think 2021, we won the Leicestershire Champions Award for Community Impact for Best Environmental Project. But also the project was listed on the NatWest Vice 100, working in social enterprise. So in the same year, so we sort of create impact in the community. And people learn from us.
I'm just wondering, at the end of my conversation with Sarah Ebanja, when we were talking about kind of operations and making sure that you had the right people in the right place, and making sure that you were kind of assessing your needs and knowing what it was you needed to do next on your journey. I know that you've had Agbero assessment, that you've kind of done the Agbero assessment. How useful was that in helping you to define your next steps or the kind of current needs of your organization?
So I think, like many of us who come to work in the sector, we come with passion rather than the strategic thinking behind the whole process. And we sort of tend to pick up the need by talking to our beneficiaries and working. And then maybe somewhere down the line you think, oh, I have to do that if I'm to move forward. I have to think about sustainability. I have to think about business planning and all that kind of thing. So I think that is where we sort of come into place, the Agbero thing, and I've done the framework. And there are things that we need to develop, like yes, we have some systems in place, but you can improve them. The process, like it's always we learn on the go. And so I think that is where that help will come into place.
Right. Okay. And have you done your assessment already?
I've
or
done
you
my
are-
assessment and handed it to Carl. Yes.
And
So
you've
I have
handed
my
it into Carl. And so did you
Yes.
just go off and do your assessment by yourself, or did you
No.
include other people in it? How did it work?
So
the assessment
we
time?
worked with these two trustees, myself and a few staff, because we have 3 staff members and a couple of volunteers.
Right.
So we got them together. But what we also did is we encouraged 2 or 3 service users to join us, beneficiaries to join us.
Right. Oh, okay.
Because then we thought, yes, we could think about this, but then what would they think about the benefits of the project? So that is how we came into,
And so it looks like you took the opportunity of the assessment,
Yes.
not just to fill in a piece of paper
No.
because you had to get it back to Carl,
No.
but to really do some deep thinking about your organization and
Yes.
to involve trustees and users and management and staff in really.
Yes. So because we set up the shop in 2017, and I think now we are in a stage that we are growing. So we wanted to do it right and see, because it's also about the future of the project. It's just not closing the doors in the next couple of years when the funding is over or when we can't generate income. It's about sustaining and also thinking what else we can do in our community.
Right. Okay.
It's just not to be, the project was initially set up just not to be a food shop, but also to do other things to support the community. And that's why we use the structure of a community benefit society instead of a charity or a CIC and things like that, because we wanted the community involved.
Sorry, you've just gone racing off. I'm going to come back to the idea of a community benefit society, because I'm going to be honest and say I don't know what that is. But just before we go there, I'd just like to stay with this idea of the Agbero assessment that you did. And if you had to choose 2 things that you thought were kind of, 2 things that you learned from it, 2 things that you think as a team when you did it, you think we must take this forward, or we must take this idea, or we must take this theme, what 2 things might have been?
It was measuring impact.
Right, okay.
Because like I said, we do good work, but we don't know how to measure and like communicate that to the funders, not only funded, to all our stakeholders. So I think we will take that, but also improving infrastructure. Improving your yes.
Yeah. And we heard in the first or the second webinar just about how important it was to funders that they were getting measurements of people's impact, that when people were coming and saying, this is what we've done, this is what it looks like, this is how we've impacted on our community, it really does kind of put them in strong positions to take work forward with funders. Onto this community benefit society thing.
Yes.
Tell me what there's lots of people I know who are watching that know all about this, and they're all screaming, how comes you don't know this, Michael?
So,
but tell me, what's a community benefit?
Having run the charity before I set up the community shop, there were certain challenges with the charitable status, because yes, you have a board of trustees, you can do you can involve the beneficiaries and do surveys and things, but there was nothing saying that. There was always a hierarchy. But a community benefit society is different to that. It's like a cooperative, 1 member, 1 vote. So no matter whether you are the director or a trustee or anyone, you're just a member and you have 1 vote. So it's sort of a democratic process. But also it's a community of interest. It's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a geographical community. It can be a community of interest. So whether it's ethnic minority people or females or male, what you choose to do. So that is what is good about it. And therefore, but also I was thinking of the long term, because if we wanted to raise funds, and when funding is extremely sort of competitive, we wanted, if we were looking at sustainability, I think that is where the community benefit model comes into beneficial, because we could go to the membership and raise like through community shares, things like this to improve, because then the community or the members know they're part of it, they take ownership and whatever, and they are sort of, they own the process. So that's what
it feels to me kind of sitting here like a really brave thing to do, to kind of start something with a vision and to kind of have a feeling of what you think you want it to be, but then to democratize that vision and to say, hang on, my vision is allowed to belong to everybody, and let's see how we can develop this vision together. Feels to me like a very brave thing to do, or did it not feel brave at the time?
It is. I think sometimes, again, going back to what is the vision of the or me as an individual or the trust, I think it is to support our community. And if our community is not part of that, then there's no point taking that top-down approach. I decide what is good for my beneficiaries and I deliver. That doesn't make sense.
Right.
Because, for example, when the food bank, when somebody comes for food parcels, we just pack whatever is there. And we give baked beans, hot dogs to somebody who never eats baked beans.
Yeah.
But that is, we think, oh, they need food, so we give them what, but we are not taking that cultural sensitive approach to things. But when the community owns it, or when you understand what is the beneficiary needs, then the whole perspective change. And then you understand that this is what they need, and then you cater to those needs. That way, they benefit, we benefit as projects. But I think it's also about leadership, what Sarah was talking about.
Go on, tell me what you mean.
And it's because we as leaders, or I think when we come, we're not going to be there forever. We have to start thinking of succession planning, and also we have to think of passing the baton to others. So at that point, if you involve everybody from the very beginning, your vision is shared, and then it multiplies.
And so you don't, and so that in terms of the kind of structure that you're developing, part of the structure is seeing the end, and you don't wait until the end to see the end.
No,
you see it beforehand at the beginning.
Yes, that is about sustainability.
That's about sustainability. Is how do we see the end at the beginning? It sounds like amazing work. I feel as if I've got a friend that lives in Leicester. I think I'm going to come and visit him.
Please.
Just to come to your shop.
Yeah.
Nico's on, and Nico's going to talk in a little while about something else. But actually, Nico, I understand your organisation is a cooperative organisation as well, is it?
Yeah, that's correct. It operates in a different model where it allows the people that work for the organization to be the ones who actually own the organization. We don't have a CEO or anybody who is at the top tier. Everybody who is working for the organization owns the organization.
Right, and so you have kind of equal shares in the organization, you have equal ownership of the organization.
Correct.
If you're in that space, Nico, and we're thinking about the work that Sarah was talking about earlier on, the kind of I call it the backbone, the finance, the management, or how does that happen when you're just a bunch of creatives wanting to do creative things?
Oh, we're not just a bunch of creatives. We also have people that no. Part of the organization is also people that do all the admin and all the accounting. So all the responsibilities are shared across us, and depending on the role, you're going to have people that are focusing more on the creative side, and other people that are focusing more on the management and accounting, if you like, or the admin part of the organization. So it's all shared.
The biggest plus of working in a co-op is
the community. You don't you feel part. You take ownership, not just your work, but also the well-being of your organization or your company. Is all about you feeling part in every kind of level, whether it's the work that you do or the sustainability of the organization itself.
And the biggest challenge of working cooperatively in that way?
I suppose competition. I mean, or sometimes can be the fact that you cannot avoid the resource. The resources is you cannot prevent people if they want to pursue new opportunities, right? And the challenge can sometimes be if the resources are running a bit low, then we all have to chip in and share the burden. But of course, we haven't had that issue before. We're always open to people to join and be part of that.
That's amazing. That's amazing. More work. I want to learn more about. But Nico, you're a designer. That's what you do? Is it you design? There's this. I've heard people talking a lot about this area of work that I don't really know a lot about. There's a lot of things I don't know a lot about in today's webinar. We need to get back onto strong footing next time. But the thing that I don't know a lot about here is this. I've heard people talking about kind of systems design work, design. What is that? What's that? Is that what you? What's that? But you know this field of.
Kind of. I mean, I'm not a designer per se. I'm a developer. I'm probably an engineer. I do the creative part of the web development process as part of it. But we also have people that are solely focused on just that. So the design, web development comes in different shapes and forms, and that depends on the company that you're working with, your client, your budget as well. So it is a process that can adjust depending on the needs of the client.
Oops. So somebody's taken over and they've decided it's time for you to share your to share your
presentation.
Your presentation. Just before you do, Nico, a website has become a really important tool for any organization. That when I'm speaking to somebody for the first time on the phone, if somebody calls me at Ubele or somebody asks us for a meeting, or I'm in a meeting with people I don't know a lot about, the first thing I do is I kind of hit their website to kind of learn about them, to learn who they are, to see what they're doing, so that I'm kind of not lost in the conversation, or I kind of hit their LinkedIn to find out who they are. And so a website isn't anymore a kind of an interesting extra, but it's right there critical to the operation, to how the operation works.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
You're gonna talk us through now.
I was, I'm planning to quickly take you through a step-by-step process of how, if you're interested, how you can build your website. But of course, we can always skip certain, it's quite a few slides, so we can always skip that and just focus solely on best practices.
Let's go through your slide deck. I'll switch my camera off.
Okay.
And over to you, boss.
Yeah, sure. First, thanks for allowing me to be part of this amazing conversation. Moving on to the next slide. If somebody can hear me, can we move to the next slide? Yeah. So the purpose of this presentation is to demonstrate why it is important to have a website and how we can do that. So moving on to the next slide. A website is usually the first point of call when somebody would like to find out more about your brand. It can create a positive impression for your company, whether you're just a curious user or a potential funder. Your website can also be the central point where funders can access information about your business or a company at any time. And it can also be the first point of call when somebody wishes to find your contact details or see any regular updates and news about your organization. Next slide. You can use your website to demonstrate the impact of your business and your success stories. As an ethical business, you can also use your website to share detailed information about your policies, your compliance with the law, and the trust your customers or clients have in you. And if you're brave enough, you can even use your website to raise funds online. Next slide. So what is this step-by-step process? Next slide. It is a simple process for building and constantly evolving or enhancing your website. Why is this important? Because it helps us build better websites, whether you're a tech-savvy person or not, a developer or just a simple user. And this involves mainly 5 steps, starting from planning, designing, creating, testing, and improving, as you can see in the graphic next to the slides. And what are these steps? So planning is the initial phase where we get to decide on what is the purpose of our website, what we want to achieve in the end, and what is our target audience. Once we have that in place, we can then move on to designing. This phase is about writing down or sketching your ideas and how roughly you would like your website to be structured. Then we can proceed to building our website using platforms such as Wix, Squarespace, or WordPress that allow us to create websites using visual builders without needing to know any coding at all. When we have a fully fledged and ready website ready, we can then put it to the test by asking our friends and family or colleagues to give it a try and let us know their feedback. Based on the feedback, we can then make our updates and launch our website live to the public. Next slide. So what are some of the best practices? What are the must-haves and what we should include in our website? First and foremost, always have a clear and visible mission statement on your website. People need to know what your brand is and what your company does as soon as they land on your homepage. Demonstrate the values of your company, whether by mentioning this explicitly or within the main content of your website. And last but not least, keep it consistent, whether in terms of look and feel or generally the language used across the different parts of your website. Next slide. When showcasing your services or products, be clear on what you offer. Use simple and engaging language without using any jargon or very technical terms. Make it easy for people to find information about your brand or services and do not take them on a journey of numerous clicks until they find what they need. Next slide. Your website must create a connection with users or a feeling of trust. Imagine yourself in their shoes and think about what would they want to see. Is your website easy to navigate? Is it visually enticing? And always include at least one method of people to reach out to you or leave feedback, whether it's just an email address, a contact form, or an online survey. Next slide. So here I'm going to share my screen. You can bear with me. Oh, sure. And I can show you quickly some of one case study. So here you can see a website that we have launched last year. As soon as you log into this website, you can immediately tell that this website is a platform for Black artists. And we intentionally kept it simple as possible, so you can scroll your way through. In this case, because we wanted to give that gallery feeling for artists, we went with the horizontal scrolling. And once you navigate through the website, you can then click on any of the artists. Here I'm clicking on our founder, who is Jonathan Akuye. You can see their artwork and even contact them by using one of those methods. Additional to that, for people that they want to be more focused on the artwork itself, we also allowed the dark mode feature, where you can probably see all these lovely, beautiful colors popping up. Simple as that. And at the end, of course, whoever wants to contact, they can leave their details using our form. Let me stop sharing. Yeah, can we go back to our presentation? Oh yeah, if you have any questions, go ahead.
Yeah, if people have got any questions to either Nico or any of tonight's guests, then put them in, and we're going back to the second part of your presentation now.
Yeah. So here are some useful tips that I have prepared for you based on my experience so far in the industry. What do you think are some of the challenges that you or your company can come across when launching a website? I mean, feel free to share your thoughts in the chat. But here I've noted down some of the common blocks that people can face. For example, not knowing where to start, or you may have a limited budget, which is a common thing with a lot of like organizations. You also may have like multiple ideas and you don't know where to start from. All these are known issues, and we always, and thankfully we have a solution to that. Moving on to the next slide. Yeah, before that, sorry, if you can go one slide back. Yeah. First and foremost, know that there will always be help and advice available for you. So do not hesitate to reach out or help or ask your network for support. Always start small. Start with something simple, such as your brand name, so you can get those creative flows running and flowing. The rest will definitely follow. Use the great internet, YouTube, ChatGPT, whatever free resources you have available at your disposal. And even if you fancy a challenge, you can even subscribe to an online course and learn how you can build a website truly by yourself. And of course, be flexible and open to ideas and adjust, and willing to adjust through this journey. Next slide. Another great way to think about planning your website is to start with a logo. A logo can enhance your brand's credibility and professionalism. You can find some logos that you like and think about what is about these logos that makes them appealing to you. Try to create a logo that represents you or your brand and helps users remember you. Most importantly, keep it simple, relevant, and unique. And this chart here, you can see I have something that I follow myself. If thinking about colors, it's important to think about what your brand does. If your brand is about emotional connection, emotional support, try to navigate towards warm colors, because these are the colors that people will make you feel like that. If your organization is more corporate, you can navigate towards some cooler colors like the shades of blues or green. And Ubele is doing that very, very cleverly with their logo. You can see that they utilized colors of yellow, red, and purple, which shows that they're not just about business or about offering advice to companies. It's more about the community and the feeling of connection. And moving on to the next slide. You can use some easy to use tools like Canva, if you heard of it, for designing your logo or your website's graphics and images. Visual builders such as Wix, Squarespace, or WordPress can help you building your website without knowing any coding at all. And you can always ask for feedback using Google Forms, or sometimes just a simple email will do the job perfectly fine. And I think that's pretty much what I wanted to share with you today. We can safely move to a Q&A. Yeah, we can skip all that and just go to a Q&A section, just for the sake of time.
So, any questions for Nico? I'll start with my question, Nico, which was, I remember the first time I had a website built. Mm-hmm. And I rung up the guy that built it about a month afterwards, and I said to him, "It's not changing." And he says, "What do you mean it's not changing?" And I didn't realize the work you had to do actually to keep a website alive and to keep it relevant. What about that work? Who does that work?
Yeah, that's a very good point. What we want to do is ideally after as a web developer or as a person who works with small business and organizations, we want to empower people to be able to feel confident to themselves. That's why we use simple and easy to use tools for doing that. And we also are there to provide training, and at any point you can reach out to us, and we can, with any queries, and we can help you throughout this process. Of course, if there's something too technical and you need support with that, we can do that for you, of course, at a very small fee.
Okay, grand. Zinthiya, as I told you, I went and kind of had a browse at your website before we started this afternoon. You've got an amazing website. How do you keep it alive? In fact, you've got 2 websites. How do you keep them alive?
So I get help from my website developer. So I think what we as an organization have also done is sort of build relationships with organizations outside our sector, like local business people and things like that. So within that group, there's a web developer who sort of helped me to build that. And then I only have to send him an email and he will make the changes. Right, so that's good. And he does it free of charge for me. Yes, I have to host the website, I pay for the hosting, but all the changes and all, he does it free of charge for me. So I only send him the picture or the news or whatever, and then he does it for me. And
so a website is one of those things you could reach out to people. You could reach out because there lots of services like that in our community.
Yeah.
And
for example, on a Tuesday, every Tuesday morning, I will be at a breakfast club with some of the local small businesses and telling them what we do and getting their support. So sometimes it's not the financial support that people give you, but also the in-kind support, which can go a long way. And especially when, as a small organization, when you lack the capacity or the staffing capacity to do things, this extra help can become very useful.
Thanks very much. Mr. Tulba, it's reached that time, sir, for us to kind of get together and have a bit of a wrap up of tonight. How would you wrap up tonight and the significance of the conversations that we've been having this evening?
Yes, thank you, Michael, for that. It's looking, stepping back and looking at the topic of operation, the infrastructure, how are we going to try and make this topic, really sexy and interesting, and to pull people in. That's why we've got obviously Nico and Zinthiya here, and of course, ably backed up by Sarah with her extensive expert knowledge. So it's a challenge because, looking at the piece in terms of the 6 domains that we're delivering Agbero Live across, so governance and leadership, financial resources, physical asset ownership, impact and effectiveness, connectedness, engagement. They're all equally important to varying degrees. And of course, there are overlaps between, for example, operational infrastructure and governance and leadership. And I think Sarah did a great job of really stressing that point. And one thing that really jumped out at me was the point that Sarah was making around leadership and management. Sort of leadership is where we're going. The management is the stuff that, kind of gets you there. And that question, which is what can make us fail? And leadership and governance is part of that, but not having the operations infrastructure is part of that. But looping it back down round to for those of you who've gone through the assessment, so we're probably just over halfway of the 32 of the Agbero sort of cohort that had the assessments. The operations and infrastructure sort of series of questions are really sort of focused a lot really on kind of electronic databases, reporting, sort of basic functions, and you kind of move up that scale from organizations that are, at the development phase, level 1, that are in the developing kind of stage. So, they have reporting systems, they're using them, but not as effectively as they should do. Maybe they've been oversold, missold a CRM that has all these bells and whistles, or a website that has all these bells and whistles, but it's not quite working for them. And then into kind of a developed organization stage. So actually, most of the day-to-day stuff is managed reasonably well using this kind of infrastructure. And then, you know, the highly developed organization is kind of all singing, all dancing, CRM, everything integrated, volunteers effectively managed through the system, collecting data that can report it to the trustees, you know, the members of the committee, if you're in a community, you know, in a community benefit society, or even to your funders. And actually, from the first group that have gone through the assessments, most organizations are currently, I think, around about the developing organization stage. So level 2, and I think the score that's been reported serves around an average about 2.2. So actually, most of the people on this call are around about this kind of level of, we've got systems, they're basic, they're working, the CRM doesn't quite connect to the website. You know, we've got a lot of work to think about what we're going to do about making that website more interactive and engaging. So, you know, we can engage more effectively with our beneficiaries. But also just to think about, you know, from a, you know, we touched upon this very briefly, but from a design thinking perspective, you know, how are we designing our systems that, and particularly in a situation where it's not linear, it's not clean. I think Zinthiya touched upon this. You try your best to think about what the end looks like, but the process, the direction of travel is never linear. So how do you develop a system that is, you know, iterative? You learn along the way, you use your beneficiaries, you speak to them, as you've said, Zinthiya, they're involved in the design process. And so you can actually design something, an infrastructure that works far more effectively for you as an organization. So, you know, just very briefly, you know, thinking about the kind of the 3 lenses of, well, what is desirable? What do we want to achieve? What's feasible? Like, what is doable in our context? And what's really viable? What can we, you know, what can we afford? And that little bit of a Venn diagram in the middle is really where we want to be trying to be thinking about designing our infrastructure and operations in a way that's proportionate to the size of the organization. You know, are we a £2 million organization, or do we have 50K? And all of these things matter and are relevant, but we just need to do it in a way that's proportionate. And hopefully, you know, this webinar, and for those of you that are part of the masterclasses and training, will then be able to get access to that level of support and thinking.
The thing that I found really interesting in listening to Zinthiya when she was talking about the assessments was it felt like the assessment had been used by her organization as a place to just stop and think. And so it wasn't just about getting some answers back to the system, but actually, how do we bring people in? How do we think? What do we need to be thinking about our organization now in order to answer these questions? Yeah, is that the way in which we're hoping that people are using the assessment?
I think so, but I think also, and I'm not necessarily being critical, but I think that speaks to Zinthiya's sort of mindset in terms of they run a community benefit society, and there's a group of people that Zinthiya wants to bring together to determine the future direction of the organisation and through the assessment. Whereas, you know, maybe some of us who are more inclined to a kind of more individualistic leadership style, I'm not necessarily saying that's better or worse, might be inclined just to do the assessment, get it over and done with, and then move on to the next job. I'm not saying that's the case, because, you know, form follows function, right? So the organizational form and structure that you choose should fit the function or the purpose of what you want to achieve. And so, you know, Zinthiya has a particular clear focus. Of course, Nico, they're operating around the kind of cooperative principles, but some of you here are unincorporated. You don't have a legal structure. Some of you are KICs. Some of you are charitable incorporated organizations. Some of you are charitable companies. But I think the principle of at least bringing enough brains around together to discuss and work through the assessments and then engage in the support program and the training going forward, I think will result in better outcomes for you.
An hour is never enough, because it kind of feels like we begin the conversation as we start the conversation. It is time to end, but it is that time. And we say 7:30, and so we'll end at 7:30. I'd like to thank you again, Phil. I'd like to thank Nico. I'd like to thank Zinthiya. I'd like to thank Sarah. And I'd like to thank Chris in the background, who does all the work for these, but we should drag him on screen one day so that people can see who it is that does all the work to make these things happen. But thanks everybody very much. And we'll see you in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Stay well.
Bye.
Bye-bye.